Have you ever wondered what the ideal life of a medieval king was like? No. Drinking wine and procreating were not his only activities. He also took part in battles, hunted wolves, and punished those who disobeyed him. You will see all this in today's video from the game called Norland. My name is Onion King, and I will basically introduce you to my life before I started my YouTube channel. I may have been a cruel ruler, but now you don't have to be afraid of me anymore. However, you better make sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel. I already have over 200 subscribers, so thanks a lot for your support. If you're wondering what Norland is, the simplest thing to say is that it's a combination of Crusader Kings and RimWorld. Obviously, it's a bit different, but I think you already understand what the game is about. Anyway, in the beginning, I had to create the perfect character for me. He looks almost exactly like me, don't you think? I was, or rather am, reckless and cynical, and I had 3 daughters who had no idea who their mother was. In this game, you have several provinces to choose from at the start. I decided to set up my kingdom roughly in the middle of the map. I chose a scenario where I started the game only with prisoners. Anyway, I will do my best in the future to enslave the neighboring regions and make everyone work for me. And so my medieval adventure began. I was a very demanding king who constantly told others how to work. However, it was more important to fight than to work, so I made soldiers out of some of my initial prisoners right away. And later I built a prison ward so that the rest of the captives had somewhere to sleep. I wanted to be known as a cruel ruler, so I planned to quickly attack my neighbors. They were to be my vassals and pay me daily tribute. In the meantime, the other prisoners were building their new house. I also had to start producing food, so I was setting up Rutabaga Field. And I left the village myself to force others to become my vassals. If you want something done right, do it yourself. I spent a while in the province to the south and informed King Alion of my intentions. Now I had to wait for his response. In the meantime, a trader came to my village who sold, among other things, captives. Unfortunately, I was the only one who could trade with him at the moment, but I continued to travel around the neighboring provinces, asking everyone to become my vassals. When I returned to my village late at night, the trader had already left and I was unable to talk to him. Taking advantage of the fact that I still had plenty of wood, I built some important buildings, such as an inn and a statue where people could pray. It was also appropriate to build a barracks, as my soldiers had nowhere to sleep. And now I was basically waiting for my neighbors to decide if they wanted to become my vassals. I had time to eat properly, and to give a few orders so that these freeloaders know what to do all day. And finally, one of the neighbors responded by calling me a coward, even though I hadn't killed anyone yet. Anyway, now I had to attack him to make him my vassal. Before that, I started making moonshine. Happy people are drunk people. And then I set off with my army to battle. And again, the trader came to the village while I was gone. First, I attacked the province to the south, since all the neighbors had already rejected my splendid proposal. I don't know why they wouldn't agree when they didn't even have a big army to defend themselves with. And even though the battle hadn't even started yet, 2 of my soldiers had already been on the run. But I still believed that I would win without any problems. Although it was getting worse with each passing moment, but finally I managed to defeat the enemy commander. Moments later, the second opponent also fell. And this is how you get a vassal who has to pay you a tribute. After all, we returned to the village with our first captive. And again, I walked past a merchant. But there was still Malka waiting to meet me, whom I could hire as a lord for a few days. So that's what I did, giving her 7 rings. The only problem was that she had nowhere to sleep, so she lay down on the floor. I wanted to be prepared for the next battle, so I hired some mercenaries for whom I had to wait a few hours. Interestingly, my vassal went to defend another neighbor that I was about to attack. To make my soldiers happier, I increased their pay. You see, it takes so little to make people happy. In the evening, I was going to get crowned and the whole village gathered to watch. For some reason, Malka crowned me, and she performed some strange rituals over me. Now I was officially king, and I could finally meet the merchant who had many interesting items for sale. But the most important were the books, which unlocked new buildings in the village, so I bought a few. And then I went hunting with Malka. We came face to face with a wolf, which I think in theory could have defeated us. But not this time. In all of this, I forgot to attack one of my neighbors in time, and so I was called a coward. However, now I had more interesting things to do, because I was dreaming of a wife. I put on a nice outfit and got ready for the wedding. But first I had to eat well. Even then, I still found time to read books with the woman who would become my wife. And in the evening, the soldiers I had hired came to the village. By now, everyone in my kingdom was happy. And finally, the long-awaited wedding was to take place. However, one of the villagers suddenly wanted to bribe my bride, and she didn't want to get away from her at all, which, I guess, broke the game, because everyone was standing around waiting, not knowing what to do, and the wedding hadn't even started yet, because my future wife was still being bribed. The only solution was to create an army and pick my wife as the commander. Immediately, everyone moved on, and only now did my wife allowed to be bribed. Although the ceremony was interrupted, the wedding went ahead. The first day of marriage, and she had already started drinking. However, I couldn't worry about that now, because I had to go and fight for more vassals. I also needed more prisoners whom I would force to work for me. So we marched first towards the bandits' camp, which was to the south. Unfortunately, some of my unarmored soldiers got shot by the enemy archers. At least nobody escaped this time yet. Overall, the battle worked out perfectly for us, as we didn't lose anyone, and after a while, we were able to celebrate victory. This way, I won gold and a few prisoners. I enjoyed it so much that I had to attack another bandit camp. After a while, however, I found that one of the neighbors was demanding that my vassal cease to be my vassal. I could not allow this to happen. But first I had to deal with more bandits, and this time somebody didn't want to fight. Fortunately, we still managed to win. There are various ways to celebrate a victory, aren't there? Unfortunately, so far, my wife has not been able to get pregnant. In preparation for the next conquests, I bought even more weapons from the merchant. Meanwhile, an enemy lord was heading to my vassal to force him to separate from me. Of course, my squad was already waiting there, ready to defend this village. Luckily, I had plenty of chances to win, as the opponent had mostly archers. Although this one guy always gave up at the beginning of the fight. However, a few strikes later, the enemy king was defeated. And then we got rid of those archers without any problems. We even managed to capture 2 of them. Of course, this result allowed me to keep my vassal. Afterwards, the soldiers returned to the village, because they deserved a rest. It was obvious that some had done everything they could. At least they were able to finally eat something. On that day, the bishop came to the village to live with us from now on. We had not yet met, and he already disliked me. However, I didn't care about that now because I had more important things on my mind, namely, conceiving offspring. Unfortunately, more neighbors did not want to take up my offer to become a vassal. I had only one response to such message, and that was to send an army. I really needed more prisoners to do the work. After all, booze won't produce itself. I also managed to build a mill, so no one here could complain about bad food. In the meantime, my army had reached the neighbor to the north. I really don't know what they wanted to defend themselves with. It's unlikely to surprise anyone if I say that this battle went quite easily for us. The fellow had to become a vassal and his daughter was taken prisoner, and once again my people were able to celebrate. In the meantime, a new guest came to the village, and I hired her for a few days. And all the time I was trying to have a baby, but unfortunately it wasn't that easy at all. In general, it turned out that Belina, whom we captured after the last fight, was pregnant. She lay on the floor like this for several hours and finally gave birth. This is apparently a baby. The next day, my men built the first temple in the village, and I continued to attack the lords who refused to become my vassals, although it was getting harder with each battle. However, in this game, these foolish kings go to every battle only to die instantly. So far, I have not met anyone who was able to defeat me. It was a great way to get new prisoners. At this point, I had 3 vassals, and my kingdom was slowly becoming the most powerful. Interestingly enough, Belina eventually left my village, even though I had not freed her. And what is even more interesting, she left her son with me. Apparently, she sold the child to free herself. Unfortunately, the game did not inform me in any way that one of the neighboring rulers had decided to liberate my vassal, and I did not manage to send an army on time. At least I gained a valuable prisoner in another battle. As a reward, I was able to meet my wife in bed. The next day, Malka led the mass in the temple in a very strange way. And since I had more and more people in the village, I needed extra field. Meat from the wolf could also come in handy. Unfortunately, on the 11th day, some soldiers started to flee my kingdom, and there was nothing I could do about it. In that case, there was nothing left for me to do but recruit additional soldiers from my many prisoners. I finally built a training ground to train my army. I forgot to mention that my wife finally got pregnant. You can tell, can't you? And as for the training ground, from now on, I could tell the soldiers how they should fight. So, while they were sitting in the village, they could brawl with each other and gain experience that way. Marital duties had to continue, despite the dirty bed. On the 13th day, I finally built the most important building in the whole village, the scaffold. From now on, everyone had to be prepared to lose their lives. There were executioners working there, running around the village looking for the people that were guilty. It was just the right time for such a scaffold, as bandits were starting to appear in the village to rob other villagers. And one of the prisoners got into a fight with one of them. Such behavior has no place in my kingdom. In order to put similar ideas out of the minds of others, I had to behead this bandit in front of the entire village. As you can see, some people were happy. From now on, this was my favorite activity every day, although the villagers were not pleased. Eventually, my wife gave birth to a son, so I was no longer surrounded only by women. After some time, I sent an army to reclaim my former vassal. The defense consisted of just one soldier, who was probably not happy about it, especially since all I did was send out archers with invisible bows, who showered the poor guy with a volley of arrows. But you have to admit that he was really tough, and when it was about to come to a clash with the commander, the opponent simply started to run away. That's how I got my vassal back. After this fight, I decided that this would be my new tactic, so I made even more soldiers out of prisoners, and I started attacking everything I could with only archers. The bandits were no match for me at all. I really sent these kind of troops into battle every time. I felt like in all those challenges where people play with archers only, it was definitely too easy, but I wanted to do it more often. However, in order not to lose too many people, I had to change the executions into a regular prison, because soon there would be no one to work here. Although these brawls deserved severe punishment, in the end, one of my vassals was attacked by a really big army. But I had prepared a large squad of archers to defend it, who kept shooting at these enemies. Admittedly, a few of the enemies came closer, so a normal fight started. The best part is that Belina stood still most of the time, but fortunately none of the enemy archers hit her. Overall, my squad was much better at shooting, and after a few such salvos, most of the enemies had fallen. This way we defeated a whole army that wanted to take my vassal, and I continued to run around the map, showering every enemy with a rain of arrows. This was the easiest way to get new vassals quickly, so in the end the map looked like this. I have no idea what happened to that border, but apparently that one village didn't belong to anyone from now on. Thanks to all these conquests, I had plenty of prisoners whom I forced to work hard for the glory of the Onion Kingdom. Occasionally a prisoner would try to escape, but that's what I had guards for, to prevent such things from happening. And for example, I even wanted to behead this thug here. Unfortunately, I didn't manage to, because my guard did it for me. And then he carried the body under this statue to burn it. This is how rebellious people end in my kingdom. I finally started making my own bows, because up until now I had only bought them. At one point, one of the bandits wanted to kill my daughter, but he broke his dagger. And then he got a good beating from several people at once. It's better not to mess with my family. After this action, my daughters grew up, and one of them even turned gray straight away. At this point, I already had a lot of vassals, but I was still 3 short of being able to declare myself emperor, and, as I understand it, end the game with a victory. Unfortunately, the other rulers still did not want to join me, so I had to personally force them to change their minds. Only unfortunately, the archers sometimes preferred melee combat, which makes them less effective, but I still managed to win such battles. I didn't even have to do anything because the archers were faster. Interestingly enough, there was one wise ruler who agreed to become my vassal without a fight. Now I only lacked one vassal to succeed. Although this map, and especially the borders of the kingdoms, was starting to look worse and worse. Things were getting worse in my kingdom too, as people began to get rutabaga typhus on a massive scale. But this was not the end of the problems. I received information that a group of strong marauders was about to attack my village. Do you think that's it? Well, no! Some bandit attacked my wife during the night. I wanted to quickly form a squad to help her, but it was too late. My wife was killed, and this bandit took all her rings. Of course, he immediately received his deserved punishment, although not everyone wanted to fight him. But the rings could not be recovered. My wife's body was carried to the temple where the funeral was to take place. At least I had time to return to the village and went straight to the funeral. All the villagers mourned the loss of the queen. On the 31st day, marauders began to approach my kingdom. Fortunately, they did not attack as soon as they arrived in the village, so I had time to prepare my army. Sadly, a lot of soldiers had health problems, and I couldn't add them to the squad. Generally, everyone in the village was sick, so it was very green everywhere. I also got sick. Unfortunately, it was so bad that I fainted and was unable to help defend the village. At least the landscape was favorable for defense, because we could shoot at the enemies who had to go around. We even managed to knock someone down, so I believed we could defend ourselves. Eventually, my daughters ran forward to stop the enemies, but a few passed on, so my archers could no longer shoot. Now the real fight to the death began. Unfortunately, one of my daughters died. And overall, it turned out that I lost this battle, losing many soldiers. And after a while, the enemies started to leave the village walking on water. This miracle was too much for the game, because it crashed. Sadly, my kingdom practically collapsed as I lost most of my men, and was incapable of doing anything myself. Consider this the end of the story of this onion kingdom, where everyone died of illness or was killed by water-walking wizards. And I lay in bed for the rest of my days contemplating how to start a YouTube channel. I hope you enjoyed this video. I would be very pleased if you decide to leave a like and write a comment. Thank you to all the new people who have recently subscribed to this channel. Let me ask you if you've seen my last video where I built a kingdom for Shrek. If not, you absolutely must click here. Go ahead. I don't bite. Click it, you dirty peasant.